Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Nam sent me notes, and Steve, check out the story from the New York Times. And this is one, we've heard of this kind of thing before, but the scope of it might surprise you. In New York, some police officers can drink and drive and avoid charges. So Sammy Sussman wrote the story, and he went through over 10,000 police disciplinary files to report on this article. And to give you an example, an Orchard Park police officer found the man in the shoulder of a 6-lane road standing near his crumpled black BMW, arguing with his girlfriend. 11 o'clock at night on a Saturday in 2021 in the suburbs of Buffalo. The BMW had slammed into a Jeep, and there were high-heel shoes toppled on the sides of the pavement outside the BMW's passenger door. The man's speech was slurred. He was unsteady on his feet. And the officer would later note in his report that the man's eyes were glassy and he smelled strongly of alcohol. The officer asked who had been driving. And then the couple looked at each other and said, well, we're state police. And so it turns out that the woman's boyfriend was an off-duty investigator and had identification to prove it. So the police officer who responded to the scene did not even bother giving the man a field sobriety test. One of his supervisors called the state police, and a sergeant with the agency just drove the two of them home. And it turns out that is their policy. That's their procedure. Days later, the man admitted in an affidavit that he'd been behind the wheel, but he was not charged with driving while intoxicated. Now, he did receive a ticket for following too closely. And when the state police investigated him months later for violating departmental policy, he admitted to drinking 6 cocktails and a shot that night. Now, he was suspended without pay for 35 days, but he is still with the state police. That case is an example of the lax approach some New York police departments have taken with officers caught drinking and driving, which protects them from the punishment faced by ordinary people. It's just one incident buried in a trove of over 10,000 disciplinary reports that this reporter went through that detailed misconduct at roughly half of the state's law enforcement agencies. The files were confidential under state law until 2020, but they were collected over the past 2 years by the New York Times and the New York Focus, a nonprofit newsroom, through a FOIA-type request. They indicate that sometimes drunk driving is treated as a human resources issue, but not a crime. In at least 17 cases between 2013 and 2023, the records show that responding officers did not take even basic steps to confirm if their fellow officers had driven drunk, despite significant indications that they had. Some officers did things like hit guardrails, hit parked cars, hit other motorists, crashed their official vehicles. Some fled the scenes of accidents. One hit a moving police car with its lights on. Yet responding officers did not follow a standard procedure for potential drunk driving cases like performing sobriety tests. None of the officers were arrested at the scene, and only one later pleaded guilty to driving while ability impaired, which is a traffic violation. And with a few exceptions, they returned to the job following short suspensions. Some officers even drove drunk to duty, one to a police station, another to a structure fire, and a third to a crime scene. So the article is quite lengthy. I'm not going to talk about the whole thing. It's there in the New York Times. You want to look it up. In New York, some police officers can drink, drive, and avoid charges. But this is something we hear about. And I've mentioned before, years and years and years ago, I used to represent drunk drivers. I haven't represented a drunk driver now in 15, 20 years. It's been a while. And I've spoken to a lot of people who've been arrested for drunk driving. And it's a very, very troubling experience because many people I've talked to had never been arrested before, had never gotten in trouble before. They had traffic tickets maybe. And so they have a couple drinks too many. They're out drinking and then they go out driving and they get pulled over and they wind up field sobriety tests. They fail. They blow something on a PBT. It's too high. They get handcuffed, put in the back of a car, taken to a police station where they might do another breathalyzer, get fingerprinted, mug-shotted, all that. And then after a few hours, they can call somebody and get taken home. The process is traumatic. And so the fact that police officers get to skip all that is one thing, but then they also get to skip the ramifications. Because when I meet the client who's been arrested for drunk driving, they've already done all the stuff at the police station. And believe it or not, the second part is just as painful as the first, because you got to go to court a couple times. And if you actually were drunk driving and you're going to get in trouble for it, there's fines and costs and fees and all kinds of stuff. You might be on probation for a while. You might lose your license for a while. It might impact your job. I know people who've lost their jobs over drunk driving convictions. You would think that if somebody was a police officer and they got busted for drunk driving, they might have trouble at their jobs. And it turns out, though, that because many of them aren't even prosecuted for it, at least not in New York State, well, how can that impact your job? You weren't arrested for it. And so it's unfair on so many levels. And I can tell you that this will vary wildly from state to state. I mentioned recently I like to watch arrest videos on YouTube because they're out there. And I've seen one very, very recently about a police officer up in northern lower Michigan, a couple hundred miles north of Detroit. And it's a backcountry road, middle of the day, maybe a Saturday afternoon. And a police officer sees a car that's doing erratic things, pulls it over, and starts talking to the driver, who is clearly intoxicated. I mean, you can see this is a body cam video. And the driver says, "I am a police officer," and he mentions the department he works for. It's down towards Detroit. And he said, this is going to get me in a lot of trouble. Can you cut me some professional courtesy? And the officer goes, no. We treat all drunk driving offenses the same. So there you go. And now, I'm not saying that every department in Michigan would do it that way, because I know they don't. The other example I'm going to give you is there was a very, very high profile, I hate to call him a politician because he was not running for statewide office, and so people outside of the county would not have known who he or she was. But the person was known to be a drinker. And there were several stories that went around that I believe had much validity, that he'd been pulled over, and the officer pulling him over recognized him. And then when they realized he was too intoxicated to drive, simply offered him a ride home. Perhaps I should give you a ride home. Perhaps you should actually do what you do with any other drunk driver. So it varies wildly from area to area, and also who you are. But the strange part is police officers cutting other police officers' brakes. I know it would be a tempting thing to do, but when it comes out that this is going on, it does cause people to lose a little more faith in the system, because they go, that's not how they treat me. And quite frankly, do you want, the other choice is they can treat everyone the same. Do we let all drunk drivers slide so that you can treat everyone like the cops? Or do you handle them all the same way and make everyone face the music for what they've done? And that, to me, is what they should be doing. And it's unfortunate, but there it is. And so I have to salute Sammy Sussman for digging through 10,000 disciplinary reports to get to these stories. And some of these stories are just absolutely astounding. I'll give you another example. In 2024, a 48-year-old chief of narcotics in a county sheriff's office struck 7 parked cars while driving the wrong direction down a one-way street. And that's according to the accident report. His sister-in-law, who is a lieutenant in the Buffalo Police Department, responded to the scene. He was not given a sobriety test, the reports show, but lawsuits filed by the vehicle owners claimed he'd been driving impaired. He did plead guilty to reckless driving and leaving the scene of an accident. Now, it wasn't one accident, it was 7 accidents, because he struck 7 parked cars. Now, here's the thing. accidents that happen in traffic can be tricky. Your car's moving, the other car's moving. Who knows? Who knows where the other car is going to go, right? A parked car shouldn't be that hard to avoid. 7 parked cars should be really easy to avoid. I mean, I understand if one car is parked illegally or something. Hit 7 parked cars? How about this one? In 2021, a 53-year-old chief of police drank at an awards gala and then crashed into a guardrail shortly before 1 a.m. Officers from his department did not perform sobriety tests and drove him home. The local district attorney investigated, and the chief did resign. And he pleaded guilty to driving while ability impaired. But understand, you might say, but Steve, they got him. There's different levels of drunk driving based on how much alcohol you have in your system. So if this guy hit a guardrail, and again, hard to tell which way those things are going because they're just all over the place. He got written for driving while ability impaired. I suspect impaired is below a bunch of other things that he might have qualified for. And so he got all these, and by he, I'm referring to the man who wrote the article, Sammy Sussman. Great examples of these stories where the police show up and they're like, oh, it's a police officer. Hang on, we're going to treat you differently. And that is a very serious problem. And one thing I can tell you, and having watched a lot of those videos on YouTube and also speaking to clients and other people who've been arrested for drunk driving, is it's not uncommon that a police officer or a judge will lecture the defendant and say, you understand, by drinking and getting behind the wheel of this several-ton killing machine, you're going to go out and run someone over and kill them. Do you understand how important that is, how serious that is, how grievous that would be? And they get these lectures, these doom and gloom lectures, which, don't get me wrong, on some level it's true. But to give that lecture to somebody, because I've heard of cops who lectured people about how drunk you are and how you're going to kill somebody. And yet, when it's a fellow police officer, they don't give that lecture. Oh, would you like a ride home? I'm only laughing at the absurdity of it. Would you like a ride home? Yes, I would. Thank you very much. Now the police department's like Uber, except they don't charge you, literally or figuratively. So it's a bad thing. And I honestly think, as a matter of public relations, considering the public relations that we've had with the police the last decade or so, it might be a good thing if police departments announced and said, you know something, we're gonna make sure this does not happen. So we now have a policy where if we spot an off-duty officer or on-duty drinking and driving, they'll be treated exactly the same at the roadside as anybody else drinking and driving. Because I personally think when they go to court, they should be treated more harshly. And I know some people say, Steve, that's a step too far. You should never treat one group more harshly than another group when it comes to court. Oh, I've mentioned before that before you get sentenced, they do a pre-sentencing investigation, and they look at you and your situation and your background and your history, and they try to determine an appropriate punishment. What's an appropriate punishment when somebody who's tasked with going out and enforcing drunk driving laws goes out and drinks and drives? Should they be treated the exact same as someone else? Because I'll tell you right now, honestly, I believe that many people who drink and drive and get busted for it on a first offense did not realize that they were beyond the limit, because they've lowered the limits so much that many people, I personally believe, could probably drive safely just at that lower limit. But the limit's been brought down so much over the last 30 years that people think I'm okay, and they aren't according to the limit. Who, on the other hand, would know the difference? A police officer should know that. They've arrested enough people and seen enough people to understand that people can feel okay when they're not okay. So a police officer should know better. Okay? So that, I believe, is what they should do. They should maybe look at it statewide, but they might not have the jurisdiction to do that. But the police departments themselves need to actually say, we're going to clean up this. We're going to see to it never happens again. If a police officer actually decides to go easy on a fellow police officer just because they're an off-duty cop, then they'll get in trouble also. But we need to treat everyone the same, especially when it comes to drunk driving. And by the way, just so we're clear here, people have asked me, they go, Steve, so you've defended drunk drivers. Do you personally think that drunk driving is wrong? Or are you in favor of it? No, of course it's wrong. Of course it's wrong. One of the things that I've told people, and I told clients this, and so I'm not announcing a new policy here. I told every single client of mine, I do not do second offense drunk drivings. I don't do them. So if you get arrested a second time, don't call me. I'm hoping that you learned your lesson. I'll do what I can for you on your first offense, but I won't help you on your second. So you'll have to call another attorney and take your chances. Interestingly, I don't know of a single client of mine who had a second drunk driving offense. So maybe my little lecture helped. I don't know. But the point is that drunk driving is very, very serious. It is a serious problem. That's why the police should take it seriously, regardless of who they just pulled over. Oh, you're a police officer. Would you like a ride home? Again, I'm laughing at the absurdity of it. So Nam, thanks for sending it. Sammy Sussman wrote that for the New York Times. In New York, some police officers can drink, drive, and avoid charges. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. The things that come to those who wait are usually the things left by those who got there first.